Welcome agents, today I want to talk about update 1.8.4 which has not been officially announced yet, but I am confident will be coming in the near future. What balance and changes should come with this update and why? Please leave your comments and feedback below. Like the video and subscribe if you enjoy daily Division content, and with that said, let's get into this. Since update 1.8.3 has come out, I've seen two types of people emerge. Those that say 1.8.3 has brought a lot of diversity to the PvP, mainly because of the striker nerf, and they love update 1.8.3, and then those who say this is the worst update yet, even worse than the striker meta because of Predator, Nomad, and the D3 meta mainly. Now, I did a video recently where I said update 1.8.3 was a success, not because it fixed all the problems, because that's not true, but it is one step closer to update 1.7, which in my opinion was the most balanced the game has ever been. Now, I've played update 1.8.3 a lot since that video, and I wouldn't say my opinion has changed, but I do understand, more so than I did before, why some people hate this update. So I think it's worth exploring some changes or fixes we are inevitably going to get in a future update, whether that be 1.8.4 or just a small patch. In preparation for this video, I made a list of 4 changes or fixes that most people in the community who hate this update have been talking about. I browsed Twitter, Reddit, the Division forums, etc., and I think this list comprises of the major talking points. Some of them will be obvious, but at least 2 I found, which is not related to the update 1.8.3, cropped up, which I think is worth being looked at in future updates. So let's start off with the most obvious balancing changes people want, and that's changes to classified Predator's Mark, Nomad, and D3. First off, let's address Predator's Mark. I think most people agree that Predator's Mark needed changes in update 1.8.3 along with Striker. So what's wrong with Predator's Mark? I think the major problems people have with Predators are as follows. There are no repercussions for having bad aim, and you can invest everything into stamina but still have one of the strongest damage builds in the game. Unlike Strikers, which punished you for bad aim and you lost stacks over time, you only lose the 10 stacks required to bleed your target if you switch targets. While Striker was fairly easy to use in update 1.8.2, Predator's Bleed is much easier to apply as it only requires 10 stacks, which takes seconds, and if you couple that with the talent Shrapnel, you also have a 30% chance of applying bleed to enemy teammates as well. Now, in order to get the maximum bleed out of the classified 6-piece, you are required to invest 9,000 points into stamina, which at first glance would suggest you lost a lot of damage because of this. You can't invest anything into firearms, which is true, but the bleed damage is so strong and it can crit, you will still be doing more damage than most DPS builds in the game. With 9k stamina, a bleed that is easy to apply and can out DPS most builds, it's easy to see why the community called for changes to this gear set back in update 1.8.2. Before we look at changes which can be made to balance this classified gear set, it's worth noting that the bleed can be removed by an immunizer station, although I've heard rumours that actually that's not working, or by the talent Adrenaline, which will provide 7 seconds of immunity upon using a medkit. I thought I'd mention that because I'm sure some people will say it's easy to counter, which is true to an extent, but the point here is classified Predator's Mark needs to be addressed, as I said. So what can we do to balance Predator's Mark? I've again scoured the internet to see what people think and have found a few things which I myself thought of and should work. First off, I think you should be punished for missing shots, just like Strikers. It shouldn't make too much difference to Predators because you only need to hit 10 shots, but it would punish those with bad aim. I don't think this should replace the switch and targets loss of stacks, but be included as well. On top of that, I do think a slight change needs to be made to the amount of damage the bleed does. I have no idea what would be a good percentage change without testing, but if I had to guess, I'd reduce the percentage bonus from 120% to 100 possibly, maybe a little less. What I am conscious of is that a massive change to this percentage would destroy this gear set, like what they have done to Strikers, and that's not balancing. So, to sum up, 2 changes to Predator's Mark: reduction to stacks or reduced to 0 when you miss a shot, and a percentage decrease to the bleed. I think that these changes will make Predator's Mark a lot more balanced. Oh, one more thing that they need to change right now is when you go into down state because of bleed from Predators, the bleed is removed so you have a chance to be revived. Thanks, Massive. Moving on, let's talk about Nomad. First off, the change Massive made to Nomad so the 6-piece no longer procs whilst in a group does not apply if you join Last Stand or Skirmish as a solo player, even though these modes are group PvP activities. Was this intentional? Possibly. In many ways I am happy with this because I didn't want Nomad to become redundant in these game modes. I do think it still needs some tweaking because it does appear that most people run Nomad, or Predator's Mark, or D3 because Nomad is a very strong gear set. I'd go as far as saying it is the strongest classified gear set right now, but there are plenty of gear sets that can mount Nomad, as you are ultimately relying on the 6-piece procking. If it doesn't, you're probably dead. Nomad changed to avoid groups of Nomads running in PvP and never dying, but there is an easy workaround for this, where players will disband in a group but remain in the same server, like in the Dark Zone, effectively multi-grouping. This needs to be addressed in a future patch. So with that in mind, do any changes need to be made to Nomad? Probably, but I can really only think of 2 changes aside from fixing the multi-grouping within the Dark Zone, and that is a deduction in the chance of the 6-piece procking every time it procs, and also a deduction in the damage mitigation you receive when the 6-piece procs. Now, I'm not sure on the deductions I would make. I guess that's what a PTS would be for. But you currently have a 50% chance of Nomad's luck. So maybe after the first proc, this goes down to 25%, then 15%, and so on. I think the 60% less damage you take upon activation for 10 seconds is too much. I mean, you're already getting 2 lives at this point. I put this down to about 20% and go from there. So that's my opinion on Nomad. I do think Nomad is the most balanced classified gear set out of the meta gear sets we will be talking about today. Now that we have Nomad out of the way, let's briefly talk about D3 FNC, or Defense. I say briefly because whilst there is currently an exploit that needs to be addressed, if you haven't seen it already, I'd highly recommend you check out Wids' channel where he showcases how it works. It's basically, you get a massive 2.3 million shield, but you get 10k worth of firearms. You are pretty much unstoppable. Aside from this exploit, I don't really think Defense is unbalanced. I just think people have deviated to this build following the Striker nerf, so we are seeing it more often in PvP. With Defense, you sacrifice your entire firearms for a really strong shield that offers team buffs when the shield takes a certain amount of damage. The only issue I can probably mention, aside from the exploit, is the fact you have to invest 9k stamina to get the full benefit from the 6-piece, meaning that even if you get behind an agent using Defense, it takes hella DPS to kill them. I don't think that's so much of a Defense issue as it is a stamina issue though, which brings me on to my next change we need in update 1.8.4. Stamina. Before update 1.8, stamina was worth 15 health per point of stamina, and with update 1.8 this was doubled to 30 health points per point of stamina. The main problem this has caused now is that investing into stamina means you become a full-blown tank that cannot be stopped, extending gunfights even longer. If you couple that, 9k stamina for example, with an extra life of Nomad, plus 60% damage mitigation for 10 seconds following that extra life, you can see why stamina has now become a problem. I think most people would agree the time to kill in the division is too long, and I think we'd all like to see this reduced. So the only way I can see this changing, unless they increase the PvP damage multiplier, is by changing stamina. I don't think it is wise to revert back to 15 health per point of stamina, but maybe a happy medium, somewhere around 20 to 23 health points. Just like all the other points I have made though, I can't be sure if this number would work, and this would have to be tested, but I do think something needs to change with stamina. Either that or they change the classified 6 pieces so you don't get 9k stamina and a crazy bleed damage. On the subject of low time to kill, let's move on to the next change that I want to see. Who remembers a time when headshots actually meant something in PvP? I don't, because it feels so long ago now, but what I do remember is a time when the Division had some skill involved when it came to PvP. Bring back headshots. Now, I'm not the best PvP player by any means, but I want us to revert back to a time when consistent headshots meant something, when the most skillful and accurate players felt rewarded for their skill. The Division PvP has come far more casual, simply relying on your gear and cheesy buffs. It baffles me that Massive made the decision to make this change in the first place, because it removed the only skill-based PvP mechanic, apart from your knowledge of the build you have, the map, talents, etc., there was, and left a casual experience. The Division 2 is right around the corner, Massive, so if you're listening, make this happen. Lastly, before we get to the end of this pretty lengthy video for me, when are the devs going to address the pre-nade stagger bug that has been in the game and reported thousands of times since day one? I mean, I get that it may not have been a priority when first reported, but surely they've had time. I'm not a game developer, so I don't even know if they can fix this now, and that's fine. But the devs have simply ignored our requests and not even mentioned this once, even though we have a state of the game every single week. On the topic of bugs, the running in place bug that was addressed with update 1.8.3 has not been fixed and is still present. Look, if you can't fix bugs for whatever reason, that's fine, but at least tell the community you can't because of X, Y, and Z, instead of saying you have and then we realise you haven't. It doesn't install much confidence in me, and I'm sure you agents, for balancing, bug fixing and general maintenance with the Division 2. Okay, there you are, agents. Thanks if you stayed until the end. I really appreciate all of your support. If you want to see more lengthy, in-depth videos, let me know in the comments below and leave a like on the video. That way I'll be able to see. With all of that said, thanks again for everything. Until the next one, Epic out.